There is a church, let's use the word dichotomy, that almost every pastor experiences at some point. You may be experiencing it today. It looks something like this. You look out on a Sunday morning and the room is pretty full. I mean, maybe even people are standing in the back. The kids' spaces are pretty crowded. Volunteers are kind of stretched, but in a good way. And the momentum, it really does feel real. And then on the flip side, you look at your giving against your budget, and some real tension shows up. I mean, growth's happening, right? This is the dichotomy. Growth is happening, but giving is just not keeping up. And it isn't because people are selfish, not because the church is unhealthy, but just because the systems that carried the church to the point you are now just weren't designed to carry what's happening now or what's coming next. It's really one of the most common pressures that growth-minded pastors face, especially if your church is attracting kind of the non-church or non-believers in your community. I mean, that's incredible. It's so successful if you're able to do that. But there is a financial pressure that comes with it too. But that pressure isn't a sign of failure, right? It's really just like a red flag. It's a leadership signal. You know what growth does? It's like any crisis, and growth can feel like a crisis. Growth really exposes gaps, like strategy gaps. In fact, growth exposes these kinds of things way faster than decline ever will. And, here's the problem. Most pastors, when you feel this giving pressure, they respond to the moment kind of all the same way, right? We increase our urgency, we add reminders, we hope that there will be some year-end generosity to close the gap. I mean, don't raise your hand, but how many of us are, spending and raising money all year in hopes that December will fix the problem? I mean, sometimes that can work, but often it just creates a lot more stress, and rarely does it build confidence. But you know this, right? The real issue is not money, it's not generosity. The real issue is clarity. People do not get excited about, deficits for sure, but you know what people do get excited about? Direction. Everybody gets enthused with direction. I recently worked with a church. I have an ongoing relationships with lots and lots of churches. And we were having this exact conversation because they were facing this exact tension. There was no crisis in their church. There was definitely no decline. There was just a lot of momentum, but the attendance momentum had outpaced their giving. And when that happens, it can be a little problematic. There are some fixed costs in your church, but there are also a lot of variable costs. And so the more volunteers that you have, the more people that attend, the more kids that are showing up, a lot of those bring cost with them. And you don't want to reduce what you're doing because what you're doing is what's fueling a lot of that growth. And so cutting back feels like going backwards. So we talked about some options. And instead of launching a capital campaign or, just doubling down on the pressure, we didn't want to do that. We made one intentional shift to close 2025. Now, I'm going to tell you what that is. And I know you're thinking, well, it's 2026. Well, I know. But I want you to hear what we did in light of what you could do. And it doesn't have to even be in December of this year. You could do this at any point during the year. The big kind of shift that we did is, and this is, you may already do this, and I may tell you this thing, and you're like, well, Gavin, that is not a big deal. But for us, it felt like a new thought. We decided to treat the pending budget, the 2026 budget, as a vision tool, not an administrative tool. And I know that, you're not writing that down, right? It sounds so simple, and it is. But I don't think it's that common. If we think about year-end conversations, again, I know that we just passed December, but just hang with me for a minute. Most year kind of end giving conversations, they often look backwards, right? Most year-end conversations look backwards. They focus on what is missing or what happened. This conversation that we began to have looked forward. It invited people into what God was building next. Instead of asking people to rescue December, we invited them to fuel January. And listen, that single shift really changed the tone of every year-end giving conversation. So we created these short, clear vision moments to use in the church service. They were like 60 to 90 seconds, right? No heavy appeals, definitely no guilt. We should never do that anyway. But we had a lot of clarity, pastoral clarity, about where the church was headed and why generosity mattered so much. We were really vulnerable in those conversations. We also created some very clear on-ramps for different kinds of givers. For first-time givers who heard these invitations and conversations, we created on-ramps that made sense for them. For people who were more consistent givers, we gave them a different kind of invitation and step. Certainly no comparison, no pressure, but we gave a lot of clarity on what it meant for you depending on what kind of giver you were. And I'll tell you what, this is what intentional leadership does. This is where intentional leadership really shows up. It's in this thing I talk about all the time, segmentation. Segmentation isn't corporate. It's really pretty highly pastoral, right? Different people need different invitations because they are in different places. So when you stop kind of speaking at your church and start speaking with your people individually or categorically, right? Generosity stops feeling kind of like this big abstract idea. It gets really personal. So, by the way, when we began doing this in this church in December, the first week they rolled out these different conversations, these different personal meetings, these, the 60, 90-second vision talks, some emails. They actually raised over $100,000 in unexpected year-end giving. And listen, this is not a church with a $15 million budget, okay? This is a church with about $1 million budget. And they raised an additional $100,000 in the course of about a week, asking this way and using the budget, looking forward to fuel the momentum that they had been experiencing. I mean, it was pretty incredible, right? I mean, they're able now to enter 2026 fully funded, fully confident, ready for everything God is about to do and to continue what he has been doing. So, here's the kind of takeaway for you, okay? If giving pressure exists in your church, don't ask, how do we fix this faster? Okay, a better question is, where is clarity missing? I think one of your greatest opportunities is your budget. Your budget is already discipling people. We don't think of it that way. The only question is whether it is doing it with intentionality or accidentally. I mean, what if this week, we just try this one simple exercise? What if you identified one ministry outcome that your budget protects this year? Okay, so not a line item, but a story, a person, a future. And then what if you talked about it with your church with some clarity, with pastoral intentionality, and with vulnerability? Let me just give you a quick example. Let's say that you have a student retreat coming up in the early spring. And I don't know, we'll make up something, but it cost $150 for kids to go. And that's not terrible. However, you also know that there's probably 20 or so students that are not going to be able to attend because of that price point. So what if you talked about this as a budget item? And what if you said, one of the things we don't want to do this fall or this spring, one of the things we do not want to do this spring is allow money to dictate ministry. We're just not going to do that. And so we have 20 scholarships that we want to create for middle school students to attend this retreat in April. And we're going to ask you to help us do that. Now, if you don't help, that's okay. We'll just have to reduce the budget somewhere else. But we don't want to pull back anywhere. We want to pour gasoline on this mission, right? We don't want to pour water on it. And you could be the gasoline that does that. Again, that might sound a little too corny to you, but the point is you're offering great clarity and you're pointing it to something specific in your budget. This is really what intentional leadership does, right? It doesn't remove kind of the responsibility of things, but it gives responsibility direction. So what if you thought of your budget as a vision tool? That's a very different way to think. And I will tell you this, at least for one church, it has made a huge, huge difference in how they are raising funds.